Greetings, everyone. The topic for today's video is when you're no longer part of the game. And by the game, I mean the dating and relationship dynamic. When you have basically decided that you're no longer part of that and no longer see yourself participating in that dynamic, how things change from your perspective in ways that you may not expect compared to when you were concerned about how people that you may have been interested in dating might have thought about you, right? When you see yourself removed from that instead. And so I've noticed this more over the years as I've kind of made the decision that I know I'm not going to get married, I'm not going to have kids. If I were to ever have some form of relationship in the future, I'm not going to completely write that off, but I know that it would be on my terms, right? I know that it would be based on mutual benefit and not based on the dynamic that society conventionally places in front of people. And in particular, the dynamic that society offers men, which is basically what I'm going to get into here in this video, but along with the idea of how your perception really changes once you decide to opt out of this entire sequence, of this entire way of looking at things. So what I've noticed over the years is that my perspective has changed considerably when it comes to this topic. It's much easier to identify male and female reproductive strategy, for example, when you no longer have personal skin in the game in terms of needing to date at all or curry the favor of anyone because you think that they could be a potential partner, or you've got to be nice to this group of women because this group of women may have a particular friend that you're interested in this way, and if you ruin your reputation with this group, they're going to trash you and then she's never going to want to date you. Anything along those lines, right? Those are just examples. Or even with guy friends where it's like there's a woman that you're interested in that's their sister or something, so you've got to try to preserve that. When you throw all of that out the window and you no longer care anymore, especially over time, right? Not right away for me at least, but over time, my perspective has changed that allows me to be sort of a neutral outside observer when it comes to these things. And it's just very easy to see when men and women are engaging in elements of this that, okay, here's what's going on. This woman is trying to upgrade from her current boyfriend, or this guy is thirsty and trying to get laid, and so he's saying whatever he thinks the woman wants to hear in order to try to make that happen, right? It becomes much more easy and much more clear when it comes to identifying these types of things. It also becomes clear that the vast majority of interactions between men and women are stacked in women's favor and to men's expense, and that a lot of the guys that are still stuck in this dynamic are really sacrificing their ability to do anything else that could be positive for themselves to basically waste time trying to either get sex, intimacy, or some relationship with a woman. And again, I'm not trying to say that everything in regard to that is a waste of time, that there's no possible positive outcome, but in the conventional dynamic, women definitely have the upper hand when it comes to dating and relationships. Most of that benefits women, and a lot of the time it's at the man's expense. There's no mutual benefit at all. It's just that the man is either thinking with his dick, or he's trying to get some sort of sense of validation from the woman, or he's trying to do what society has basically indoctrinated him to do, but he's really not gaining a whole lot through that process. And when you become an outside observer to this, it's very interesting to look at because it becomes very clear that, oh, well, this is not really to this guy's advantage, but he's trying to pick up this woman and he's probably going to say or do anything to make that happen. Or, hey, this woman over here, she probably has a boyfriend at home or a husband, but she thinks she can do better, or maybe she just doesn't care, or maybe you don't know that she does. Maybe in some cases she gives you the idea that she's got someone else in her life and she just doesn't care, right? I'm not saying you assume that that's the case automatically, but it's not surprising when it happens that way. In other words, it's not surprising that women act based on hypergamy, Briefolt's law, their own solipsistic way of thinking, and so forth. I'm not saying every single conversation about relationships is the woman trying to upgrade or whatnot. But it's not surprising when you see that happening in real time, because you've taken yourself out of that dynamic and you no longer really have a stake in the game, right? You're not trying to have a favorable view in the eyes of any particular woman anymore, or even other men as far as this is concerned, where you're trying to get one of your buddies to ask a woman out. None of that happens, right? Like, you just don't care about any of those concerns anymore. When you reach that point, it's interesting how these things become more obvious. And I want to say in this video that this is a major advantage to having a MGTOW type of philosophy, where it allows you to view all these potential interactions with women that you could potentially have, or that other men are having, from a more objective and self-interested point of view, right? What's in it for me? Is there really any sort of positive thing with this? Or is it just a matter of trying to meet the standard that's expected of men, where they put themselves out there, they accept the possibility of rejection, right? They accept the woman potentially having a negative reaction toward them just so that they may have a slight chance to get some sex or to get some form of relationship or validation from the woman. You know, you can see this from a more self-interested point of view, so that you're not going to engage in that process. You're not even going to have an interest in going through that whole sequence of events. You're just going to reject doing this outright. And unless there's a clear benefit where a woman actually is your friend, or she actually has supported you in some way with something that you've dealt with, then who cares, right? It becomes a more of an equal dynamic in the sense that you have basically the say of what's going on, and other men and women, they can engage in their kind of reproductive strategies if they want to, because you're done with that, right? There's a major advantage coming at it from that point of view. So I want to say, for the men that are in the red pill rage stage, as it's called, where you're angry because you've been told all these sets of lies about women and about relationships and about men having the upper hand in society and needing to do more for women, and you've come to see pretty clearly that the truth is the other way around. You know, I want to let those men know that there is light at the end of the tunnel once you begin to successfully apply what you've learned with so-called red pill knowledge. There is an advantage that you will gain at the end of all this when you completely remove yourself from that dynamic of, oh, I need to find a woman to date. What if I don't find the person that's right for me? What if this woman doesn't find me attractive? When all that becomes pretty much irrelevant to you because you've found something else to focus on with your life that gives you some sense of fulfillment or purpose, that's a positive, healthy thing for you, hopefully. Right? I'm not saying that's easy to do, or that there's just one thing in life that can guarantee you that. It's not that simple. It's not that easy. But once you begin to move toward that, and you move away from this whole, my entire self-worth is determined by whether I can find a partner or not, or whether I can find a woman that wants to date me, when you throw all that out the window, you do find a major sort of advantageous position where now you can dictate the terms if you're still willing to date. And I'm not saying that if you're dating someone that the other person doesn't matter, but she has to agree to your terms, otherwise you just aren't interested. Or you can just reject dating outright and not deal with any of it. But you're still not really part of the game. You're not playing this game of, oh, who can I have children with today, given how feminism has ruined conventional and traditional relationships? Or what if this girl rejects me even though I really like her? You put less and less value on that until you're really no longer part of that dynamic anyway, and then you can come at that from a position of, you know what, there's really not that much of value here, so if I do date in the future, that's fine. If I don't, that's fine. But I'm going to just step back and let other people do what they want to do and just observe. But I'm no longer going to be a part of that type of thinking, that type of box that society tries to put me in as a man, especially today. I'm not going to do that anymore. And when you get to that point where you put that into practice over time, your perspective really changes, right? Once you get through that red pill rage sort of phase or stage, you can have a lot more peace of mind, and you can see, you know what, here's what's going on here. I'm glad I'm not a part of that. I'm glad I'm not this married guy that has this happy wife, happy life philosophy because he's basically forced to. I'm glad that I'm not trying to pick women up all the time and wasting time and resources on that just to get an STD or a woman that gets pregnant potentially with my kid. I'm glad I'm not going to be part of that game whatsoever. And if other people want to do that to their detriment, especially men, right, I can give them the information, right? I can try to reach them, but a lot of guys are just going to continue to do this. And I'm glad that I'm not one of those men. I'm glad that I'm not part of this situation anymore. There's a lot of value to be had with that. And even if you do decide to date or have female friends or sleep with a particular woman, you know where it stands and you can control when it ends, right? When it's no longer mutually beneficial and it no longer reflects your self-interest, if it ever does, you can remove yourself from that dynamic a lot more easily than the man that's stuck into the whole simpish, we've got to try to find a woman to validate ourselves type of philosophy, type of blue pill, so to speak, mentality. So when you do choose, or if you do choose to interact with women, you may not be invulnerable to certain negative outcomes, right? A woman can still decide that she's going to have a fight with you or that she's going to treat you poorly. And under bad circumstances, if you trust the wrong woman at all, right, she can still make a false accusation. And these are things to consider. But you can identify situations that aren't to your advantage and opt out far more easily and far more quickly than your average man out there today that basically still wants to measure his self-worth based on what a particular woman may say or based on what society tells him. You can just reject outright or opt out a lot earlier in your interactions with women when you see that there's no benefit to you in those interactions, that you're not going to get anything that you want from anything that that woman may offer you, that she's not going to be your friend anyway, that she has this nasty feministic view of men, that she's not someone that you want to sleep with because she's been with everybody else in town. You can reach these conclusions a lot more readily when you have this sort of knowledge, when you apply that knowledge by taking yourself out of this type of game and out of this dynamic, especially again over time. It really does make a big difference. It helps you see these situations more clearly. And so this gives you far more of an ability, I think, to make good choices for yourself compared to the vast majority of men who are still out there playing this game, trying to find a partner, trying to live up to the standard of being attractive to women. When you take yourself out of that picture, when you're no longer part of that game, a lot of this stuff becomes a lot easier to see. You have this sort of neutral observer, objective kind of point of view that you can have that is of a lot of value, I think. So I just wanted to put that out there for men that are struggling with their desire to still be with a woman, who are in sort of a red pill rage stage of realization, of self-awareness, where you've become pretty much aware of how society and women view men as utilities, or nothing you do is ever good enough and you just need to do more for women and you don't really matter as a person, and you've rejected all that, but you're angry and resentful still because you've not been able to get to a point where you've moved past that. And that's understandable, right? I don't mean that as any sort of slight or attempt to shame anyone. Like, I get going through that stage, but when you work your way through that, once you get to a point where you're no longer part of the relationship game and you just don't care anymore about all of that, especially in terms of what you're supposed to care about, right? How you're supposed to essentially sell yourself out to try to get a woman to want to be with you. Once you realize that that's not in your interest and you've moved past that for a period of time, things do get a lot better. Things become a lot more peaceful. You no longer have this sort of willingness to be part of things that aren't in your self-interest. You can see the games that are being played, especially on the female side. You can see them acting on their hypergamy. You can see them treating good men like crap. And you've already rejected all that, so they don't have access to you. They don't have the ability to do that kind of thing to you for the most part. And even if you do still decide to date in some form or have some form of relationship with a woman, you are now equipped to basically say, okay, this is no longer in my self-interest, so I'm going to move on. Or this supposed female friend has shown that she's not really my friend, so I'm just going to move on. Right? You can do that a lot more easily with the women that you do allow into your life. So I just wanted to speak of how I've noticed with myself that when you're no longer part of this game, when you're no longer trying to get the favor of women or find someone to have a relationship with, it really changes the dynamic. When you don't care whether women really like you or not, and you don't care whether you live up to the standards that society places on you as a man to get women to like you, you can really see things from a much healthier perspective. You can reject a lot of the nonsense, and your point of view by not playing this game changes a great deal from when you are a so-called blue-pilled man still doing these kinds of things. And I just wanted to point out that there is a major sort of shift in point of view. There's a major shift in how you approach these situations once you really sort of start to apply this knowledge to your life and once you reject being part of this game over a period of time.